Chapter 16. William stepped across the place where the wizard had twisted in his last agonies and took the necklace from Calendar's hands. She gave it up without a word and sank to the floor, sobbing, crouched in her familiar position. He glanced up at the soldiers still standing at attention by the door. They were staring at him speechlessly. "I have no wish to fight you," he said. Brian, his guard, was the first to react. "My lord," he said, with a formal bow, "we thank you for our freedom from the wizard's tyranny. We are at your command." "Not mine, Brian. This man's," William said, going over to stand in front of Sir Simon. "But how do we break the lead spell? How can we bring him back?" Brian went to Calendar and muttered something in her ear, but she just shook her head and pushed him away. "She will not tell me how to undo the spell, my lord," he said. "I don't think she knows," William said. "I guess the wizard never undid any of his spells. But I have an idea. I brought Sir Simon back to life once. Maybe I can do it again." While the soldiers watched, William put his arms around his old friend and pressed his cheek against the cold metal wrinkles of his tunic. "Come back, Sir Simon," he whispered. "Your kingdom's been retaken." Suddenly, William felt those arms crushing him in a familiar hug, and he looked up to see the knight's eyes filled with tears. "Sir Simon!" he cried. "You're alive!" The knight didn't speak, but held his squire at arm's length as if to study his face more closely. Then he looked slowly around the room. "The wizard?" he asked. "He's gone. We defeated him." "Your weapons are stronger than mine, William." William looked away, embarrassed. "I see you found yourself a page," he said, taking the lead hands of Richard's son in his own. Gradually they warmed and turned to flesh. The boy's eyes lost their blank gaze and focused on William. "You did as I asked and brought the Silver Knight to me," William said. The boy nodded. "What's your name?" "Tolliver, if you please, sir." William smiled. "You weren't calling me sir before, Tolliver." "No," the boy replied with a grin. "What about the others?" Sir Simon asked. "How do we bring them back?" "I think I can do it," William said. "It seems to work the same way it did in the castle." He went from one lead figure to another, touching a cheek here, a hand there, until the room was filled with live people, asking questions and stretching their stiff limbs. As the story of the wizard's defeat was passed from one to another, they pressed forward to shake William's hand. When that was done, he took Tolliver and Sir Simon over to the corner where Calendar still crouched. He touched her on the shoulder. "Calendar," he said softly, "I brought some people to see you. Here's Sir Simon and Tolliver, your grandson." She wouldn't look up, but pulled William down beside her. "I cannot bear to have them see me like this. A wizened old woman with a black heart. You never knew me any different, but Simon was my beloved one before the days of the wizard." Sir Simon took her hands and lifted her up so that he could see her face, then hugged her. "My beloved old Calendar." That hug of Sir Simon's and the love in his voice melted Calendar as quickly as William's hands had softened the leaden bodies. For the first time since William had met her, he saw her smile. "You do not hate me, my lord," she cried. "I should have struggled harder with Alistair to rescue you." "Even if you had, there was nothing you could have done against his power. These years with the wizard must have been very lonely ones. But the wizard's spells are broken, thanks to our good friend William," Sir Simon went on. "You will stay with me and live out your life in comfort, surrounded by your family." William pushed Tolliver forward. The old woman and the young boy stared at each other, then joined hands, then hugged. William thought he'd never seen two people look so happy, and felt the tears coming into his own eyes. For once, he let them slide down his cheeks, and when Calendar caught sight of them, she reached up to brush them away. "It's all right, Calendar. I'm just happy for you," he said. "I know, my lord. I know you are." At a signal from Sir Simon, Tolliver led his grandmother off to the corner of the room, where they sat down immediately and began to talk. "Now you must put the necklace on," Sir Simon said. "It holds the token you will need for the Lady Eleanor." William looked more closely at the prize he'd come such a long way to get. The 2 medallions dangled from the long red ribbon. The first was the reverse side of the Janus medal that Mrs. Phillips had back in the castle. It looked identical, except for a kinder expression on the god's face, and the 2 keys engraved on either side of his head. "The keys are for her freedom?" he said, showing the token to Sir Simon. "And this is the lead disc," the knight said. "What are those markings on the top?" William asked. Sir Simon picked up the medal rather gingerly and peered at it. "That is the sign of Saturn," he said. "According to the old alchemists, lead was associated with Saturn, god of death and decay, an evil sign." William slipped the lead medal off the ribbon. "I only need the Janus token," he said. "You take this and keep it somewhere safe. I don't want it to fall into the wrong hands." There was no time for further discussion, as the crowds were pressed forward once more. Brian appeared by William's side with a big black cat in his arms. "Where did that come from?" William asked. "Spells are all broken," Brian explained. "This is Calendar's cat. You knew him better as the dragon that guarded the castle gates." William looked into the animal's eyes, but he saw no horrible pictures of fire, only a calm, mysterious expression. Suddenly the cat meowed. "I think he's hungry, sir," Brian said. "I shall see to it he gets something to eat." William was eager to return home immediately, but the Silver Knight insisted that a celebration be held first, so a huge banquet was prepared. In the hall upstairs, William sat at the high table between Sir Simon and Richard, the apple-tree man, who had come to the castle looking for his son. Each plate was heaped with good things, and each cup was full to the brim. While they waited for all to be seated, William asked Sir Simon something he'd been wanting to know. "How did you get out of the forest, Sir Simon? I stood and called your name, hoping my voice would lead you back." Sir Simon shook his head, staring down at his plate full of meat, bread, and savories. "To think that I should be fooled by the vision of midnight. But Lord Luck himself must have been walking beside me, because eventually, after much wandering, at the edge of despair, I found myself next to a real stream. I followed it out of the forest, knowing that at least I was going in one direction." He turned to Richard, the apple-tree man. "Tolliver found me and told me that William had gone ahead. I made such haste to catch up with him, I must have passed him altogether." I'm afraid he was up a tree for a very long time, thanks to me," Richard replied, smiling at William. "Well, we're all together now. That's what counts," Sir Simon said. Standing up, he knocked on the table with his fist until the great hall fell silent, then raised his tankard. "Here's to young William, who found his own way through the dark forest. He alone has defeated the curse of a man who held our kingdom prisoner for far too long. Let us remember the lesson William has taught us. The weapons that you need to fight the battle are inside your own heart. To William," he shouted. "To William," answered 100 happy voices. William jumped to his feet and put his hands up for silence. When the tumult had subsided, he raised his own tankard and shouted, "To Lady Eleanor!" "To the Lady Eleanor!" they roared back. Everyone drank deeply, and the eating began, to the sound of laughter, music, and the cheerful thunk of the wooden bowls against the table. "What is all of this food?" William asked, as one serving plate after another was carried into the banquet hall. "Boar's head with pudding, squirrel stew, boiled chicken, cake with sliced apples," Richard rattled off, pointing to the various things on William's plate. "No, but where did it come from? The land I traveled through couldn't possibly have produced this much food." "The moment the wizard was defeated, the land sprang back to life as if there'd never been a famine," Richard explained. "Rather nice, that." After filling his stomach, William gave up all effort at conversation and simply sat back to enjoy the scene. The good food and the hot, sweet cider lulled him to sleep, and later in the evening he felt Sir Simon's strong arms carrying him to bed. When William woke the next morning, Tolliver was waiting for him with a basin of water. "What will you do now that the wizard's gone?" William asked as he splashed his face clean. "Sir Simon says I may stay in the castle and be apprenticed to one of the squires. I asked if it could be you, sir, but he told me you're leaving. Wish you'd stay." "There's someone waiting for me at home," William said. He ate a quick breakfast with Sir Simon, who was quiet after the revelry of the night before. "Will it be just as difficult to get through the forest going the other way?" William asked. "You've forgotten, William, that the spells are all broken. The forest is harmless now. Tolliver wishes to go with you. I'll give you each a horse, and he can lead yours back when he's seen you safely to the castle. There will be enough food in the pack so that you can take some back to the Lady Eleanor. I expect she's finished off all the mice in the attic by now. Please send her my kindest regards. I shall miss her." His voice drifted off. He shook himself and stood up. "I doubt we shall meet again, young William," he said as they embraced. "But we shall live in each other's thoughts forever." William held on to his old friend for an extra moment. "I can't believe you won't be waiting for me in the attic after school," he whispered. For the second time in as many days, William began to cry, but he didn't try to hold back his tears. It was right to feel sad, and right to show it. "Goodbye, Sir Simon," he said. "I'll never forget you." William and Tolliver rode out into the cool morning. When the steep hill led away from the castle and dipped down the first time, William turned to look back. The black pennant had been replaced with a silver flag, which curled lazily in the early morning breeze. Sir Simon stood on the wall walk next to one of his guards, arm raised in farewell. William returned the wave and pressed his horse forward with a sharp kick. The return journey took 2 days. Tolliver was an easy companion, respectful of William's silences, but eager to serve him whenever possible. Everyone they passed greeted them cheerfully, and often people pressed food on them or directed them to the nearest source of water for a cool drink. The news of the wizard's defeat had given the people renewed hope, and they'd returned to reclaim their land. William and Tolliver spent the night at the edge of the forest, and in the morning William handed his horse over to the page. "I want to go alone from here, Tolliver. Take your master's horse back to him with all my best wishes." "But, sir, I was to go all the way with you," Tolliver said. "I want to spend the day alone," William explained. "Well, goodbye then. We won't forget you," Tolliver said. "Good luck." "And to you," William replied, as he turned away from the wistful face and was lost in the dark coolness of the forest. This time there were no tempting visions, no noisy roar of angry animals, just a cool path patterned by spots of sunlight that led into the trees. It took an afternoon to walk from the far edge of the forest to the castle. William reached the gate just as the sun was setting. Before he had time to raise his hand or shout a greeting, he heard the familiar creak as the portcullis was raised and the wooden doors were opened. Then, ever so slowly, the drawbridge was lowered. He jumped the last foot of space before it hit the ground. Mrs. Phillips was waiting for him under the front arch.